Did you ever wonder what would happen if you would cross Bezos's phallic-shaped rocket with a SpaceX Dragon capsule? Well, you don't have to wonder anymore, because a Chinese company called CAS Space did apparently think about it a bit too much and came up with this hilarious mixture of the SpaceX Crew Dragon and the Blue Origin New Shepard. So what's the deal with this crazy hybrid? And let's also talk about the reassignment by NASA of 2 astronauts that should have flown on the Boeing Starliner to the ISS, but were reassigned to SpaceX's Crew Dragon. Are these the first signs of the end for the Boeing Starliner? Well, let's try to find out. We all know that Chinese companies sometimes like to copy stuff. You know, not often, really not often, but when they do, then it's sure to be really subtle. It's so subtle that you surely wouldn't notice it in any way. That is of course also true for the newest Chinese copy-pasting experiment, namely the brand new reusable space tourism rocket from CAS Space, a commercial spin-off from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. They were apparently strongly inspired by Blue Origin and SpaceX in this one here. However, they certainly thought that the shape of the new Shepard was maybe a bit too inappropriate for the strict CCP moral code, so they couldn't keep that design one-to-one. However, the capsule is really unaltered, pure 100% SpaceX Crew Dragon. There are also some other alterations, namely the rocket won't use one single engine design as the new Shepard does, but will instead use 5 kerosene liquid oxygen engines. New Shepard's engine is a BE3 liquid hydrogen oxygen engine, so technology-wise at least, there are some differences. But the goal is exactly the same as the goal of Blue Origin, namely to bring space tourists such as William Shatner to space. Oh, Captain Kirk, if you really wanted to go to space, you should have asked SpaceX. But then again, that's probably a bit too expensive for you, isn't it? Anyhow, so space tourists can in the future then also choose the Chinese variant of Blue Origin's rocket. That will also be a suborbital rocket, meaning this rocket is not able to reach an Earth orbit where it would circle the Earth at an altitude of over 400 kilometers. Instead, it will just briefly pass the famous Kármán line at an altitude of 100 kilometers, where 7 passengers will be able to witness weightlessness for a few minutes and marvel at the blackness of space and see a slight curvature of the Earth. The rocket and capsule are both fully reusable, and the first flight demo is going to take place according to current plans already by next year, with full tourism services to be launched by 2024. Although the rocket design itself is hilarious in its absolutely brutally blunt copying style, we have to say that it's a nice development. It's good that China also copies the American space sector. This means more competition and in turn more pressure on the US to keep innovating and to be one step ahead. In the case of SpaceX, more like 5 steps ahead. I'm of the opinion, and that's just my opinion, that the US is at its best when there's a powerful adversary competing with it. And since China really makes no secret out of its space ambitions, the US will be forced to continue innovating in order to stay ahead of China in space. And isn't imitation the most sincere form of flattery? China even wants to copy SpaceX's Starship, something which they won't realistically be able to achieve anytime soon, but they might have a Starship copy in maybe 10 years. And that of course will force SpaceX to build next generation rocket systems that leave the Chinese copies in the dust. Or the Chinese moon base ambitions. They will ensure continued funding to set up a permanent US-led moon base, and a lot sooner than would be the case without pressure from China. So you see, in the end, it's maybe not so bad that they copy stuff. It forces the West to keep innovating. And before we continue, please subscribe to this channel, as it would greatly motivate us to keep pumping out videos on all spaceflight related topics. Thank you very much in advance. Okay, so China forces the West to innovate. That is certainly true for SpaceX. They are so ridiculously far ahead of anyone else that it will stay that way for a very long time. But it's certainly not true for old space. They really failed to innovate in the last decades, and it is especially true for Boeing. And now, in a quite stunning move, NASA seems to be losing patience with Boeing's Starliner, the space capsule which should have been the competitor to SpaceX's Crew Dragon, and which should have already been transporting astronauts to the ISS. But since its second uncrewed flight attempt on August 3rd was aborted, due to 13 valves in the propulsion system failing to open, the next test flight has now slipped to 2022. We don't even know exactly when in 2022. And then, if the next flight is successful, yes, then there will be a first crewed flight to the ISS, and that will be realistically the case in late 2022. But should anything go wrong again with the uncrewed test flight, we can easily see this shifting to 2023. All the while, SpaceX is launching astronauts to the ISS on a regular basis by now, and even starting to send the first civilians to space on completely private missions, such as with Inspiration 4. But many more such missions are already in the pipeline, and it will become absolutely standard in the years to come. So now NASA is apparently starting to lose patience with the constant delays of Starliner and has reassigned 2 astronauts that should have flown with Starliner to SpaceX Crew Dragon instead. At a media briefing recently about the upcoming SpaceX Crew 3 flight on October 30th, NASA Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stitch expressed confidence in Boeing, but said no Starliner flights will take place this year and declined to speculate on when they might happen in 2022. He said, quote, "We have not lost confidence in the Boeing team, as we work hand in hand with them to find and fix the valve problem." End quote. A very diplomatic formulation. He added that a press release will be issued later this week with a more formal update on the progress being made. So the 2 astronauts in question are Nicole Mann and Josh Cassada, 2 astronaut newbies who will now gather some spaceflight experience on the Crew Dragon. But the interesting thing is that Mann and Cassada were reassigned to the SpaceX Crew 5 mission, which will launch in fall 2022. This means that NASA thinks that even in 1 year's time, Boeing will not be able to launch crewed missions to the ISS on Starliner. Talking about full confidence, huh? Boeing said in a statement, quote, "We understand the agencies need to make adjustments to get members of the current astronaut class flying experience on an operational vehicle while the development of the Starliner spacecraft continues. We fully support NASA's decision and remain committed to putting the safety of the astronauts who will fly on our vehicle first." End quote. Oh man, you gotta love press release fluff talk. All these euphemisms and desperate tries to save face. The fact is that if NASA wouldn't be obliged by contract to continue funding Boeing, they would pretty surely ditch Boeing without hesitation. But of course, Boeing, being an old aerospace contractor, many politicians will ensure that NASA keeps funding them. The Commercial Crew Program was initiated as far back as 2010, where besides SpaceX and Boeing, Sierra Nevada was still a contender with their cool Dream Chaser spacecraft. That surely would have been a better choice than Boeing, but hey, the bodies in Congress of course almost guaranteed that Boeing would be chosen instead. So in 2014, Sierra Nevada Corporation flew out of the competition with only SpaceX and Boeing remaining. SpaceX was back then luckily already flying regular resupply missions to the ISS with Cargo Dragon, so their pick was secured. And now NASA is contractually obliged to stick with Boeing. And of course, they have to publicly pretend that they are super fine with that. It's basically like a Hollywood celebrity couple that outwards pretends to be super happy, while at home they keep fighting and would like nothing more than to get a divorce, but they don't do it because of the children. So now NASA is in that weird situation, and they can only hope that Boeing will be able to resolve their issues and that Starliner will fly by early 2023. Let's see if the Dear Moon mission will circle the moon before Starliner will launch astronauts to the ISS. Now that would be pretty damn hilarious. So then, friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Jishwen and me, we wish you all the best, have a nice day, and on to the future.